his projects he had in his life. Most of them in the 80s crossed paths with and befriended the musician Paul McCartney, with who he made several documentaries. He worked with Pink Floyd, Monty Python and Grace Kelly, also making part of the first European team allowed to film in Saudi Arabia. He had been a member of the BAFTA for several years. He is one of the judges.
You're seeing at the moment some of my work. So I'll just let this end because Maria's been putting it together. So anyway, I'll talk about this afterwards.
Barry, can you put a microphone a little bit closer so you can talk? Yeah.
There. Okay. Have a look at some of my work.
Before we talk about your incredible career, let's go back to where your passion from cinema came from and how at 12 years old you decided that you wanted to take this industry.
Yes, it's one of those things. You watch television. I was watching television, and I thought, well, how do you put it together? And then someone I knew was on a discussion program, and he then gave me a book about working in television, which I very rapidly thought, television's not very cool. So I then ran away to the film industry because I knew two people worked in the film industry, and I lived one side of London, and the film industry was the other side of London, and London's 13 million people, so it's a lot of getting across. And both of them said, well, even if I didn't know whether to go to art school or go to university, and both of them said, well, when you get your double first out of Cambridge, you still have to start as a runner because the union controls who works in the industry. So I ran away to the industry, and fortunately, there was a thing called Swinging London about to happen. Yeah, when the Beatles were first doing that, and it was a period when I started, you couldn't become a film editor till you were maybe 35, and then Swinging London with this great swell of youth knows better meant that I was actually editing when I was 20, and I became a director when I was in about 24, 25. So that was helped by what was going on. Oh, it's going to start again. My God! Right, turn it off. Anyway, but
that's incredible. During these years where you started from the lowest position, basically you just answered that, but what was difficulties of your goals to get there?
Difficulty of what?
Was it difficult to reach your goals?
What, to get into the industry?
To get to an industry.
It was just getting into the industry was the difficult thing. As I said, at the time, you could only get into the film industry if you couldn't work in the industry without having a union ticket, a union card, and you couldn't join the union unless you had a job. So it was a catch-22, and that's why you see endless people start as runners, as messenger boys, as messengers, as gophers, as they go. In America, you say, well, why do you say gopher? Well, go for the tea, go for the coffee. You know, so that's how you learn. And what became very much the film industry is largely crafts, yeah, and you watch other people do them. and then you go, oh, right, I can do that. I learn how to do that. And so it became quite an interesting circumstance. Like, I worked out I wanted to work in the editorial department, editing and montage, cutting, much more than in the camera department. The reason, so you know why there's not many people refer to cameramen, because the first job in the camera department was the clapper loader, and one of the things he had to do was pick up the cameras. Now, your cameras are very tiny. The cameras in the film industry, when I originally worked, and I'm starting in 1963, were probably about half the size of the desk over there. And they weighed a vast amount because they had to be very accurate, because otherwise the picture moved around in the screen. So the very first rung of working in the camera department was lifting these bloody great big things. And so hardly any women ever applied to do it. There was always women in the cutting rooms. And in fact, in France and Russia, virtually all the editors are women. I've worked in both France and once when I was an editor, I was working in France in Studio Victorine in Nice, and the doors kept slamming, and we couldn't work out, myself and my assistant couldn't work out why. And then we realized that what was happening is that all the editors and their assistants were coming to look at the two men who were working on a strange machine, which was a moviola, as against a flatbed viewing device, which they used in France. And what it was, that eventually I said to my assistant, it was a guy called Robbie, who was a very big guy, and I said, just stand by the door and see why it keeps slamming. And what happened, there was suddenly a scream, and a French guy going, no. And he couldn't speak a word of French. And I said, what's right? And she said, oh, I came down here because everyone's talking about two men working in the editorial block. And so, there was a distinction then, and because they had never seen anyone working on a moviola. So to actually get into the film industry was always difficult. Once, and there was rather that circumstance, once you've got into it, you've done what everyone else did, is you've actually managed to get into it. Now it's very different. No one ever starts as young as I do now, because they usually go to places like this in the UK, and a lot of people won't even get a job until they've gone to the British Film School, the National Film School as it's called, where you have to be postgraduate to get in. So filmmakers are just getting older and older and older, you see. So there we go. You must stop running this thing, because it's getting boring now. They've all seen it about 8 times. But anyway, does that answer your question?
That does, but another question to go along with that answer. Did you ever think about giving up? Did you ever think about giving up on...
Oh, giving up?
Yeah.
No, not really. It's quite fun. You get paid to go around the world. You get paid quite well. You get treated quite well. There's occasions when you finish things, you go, that wasn't very good, And I've written a book about David Lean, who was very famous. I think 3 Oscars, and he said that as a filmmaker, if you ever make anything perfect, you've got to give up, because you can't make anything perfect. So I've never made anything perfect. There's always, you sit there and go, oh God, there's that bit. To put this reel together, I had to find some of my old films, and I go, oh God, did I do? Oh Jesus, no. I never wanted to give up. I sort of gave up when I got Yeah, well, there's a long story why I stopped. It was basically, I stopped working basically because my partner had a massive stroke. She had a third of her head full of blood, and I became a nurse. So I go from film director to nurse. So there we go.
I'm sorry. You started editing commercials and then to direct them. And then you started to make longer productions like documentaries. How was the transition like?
It's basically, it was quite easy at the time. I had been an editor for people like Hugh Hudson, who directed Chariots of Fire. I had been an editor for Alan Parker, who directed Fame, and there's always been a route from editing to directing. David Lean, I just mentioned, he was an editor and then became a director. So it's basic. I mean, you have to remember is that probably the only unique art we have in the film and television industry is editing, because photography, doesn't need film, doesn't need television, and design and actors are all common in other areas, but the only unique art that we have in the motion picture industry, as it's now termed, is editing. And editing has lots of tricks to do with it. Although Alfred Hitchcock was never an editor, his wife always got the credit as being an editor, but he was pretty much the editor, and looks at lots of reasons where, if you find shot A joined to shot B, it doesn't equal AB equals C. It has a different reaction. I once I had to give a talk to the Creative Circle, which is an advertising industry thing in London, and I had. And I wanted to illustrate something, and I had made a beer commercial where literally the guy drinks the beer and then looks away nervously and puts it down, and so we had actually used that, and in one point we had cut to a stripper, and then I said, right, okay, when you cut back to the man, what's he thinking? Oh, he's embarrassed, he's this, he's a very good actor, etc. And then I ran it again, and we had a shot, there's a very famous shot from the Vietnam War where a guy gets his head blown out and the blood, and everyone said, oh, he felt horrified. He's horrified. I said, it's the same shot. It's you are putting what you feel back into what the actor is portraying. And this is why actors often say film and television. There's a long circumstance about that film is for money, television is for fame, but the theatre is for actors. Because there isn't this person called an editor playing in between. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
or
yes,
do
yes.
I go off on a tangent? Sorry.
No, that did answer. Thank you. How was it like to be producer and director at the same time?
What's it like?
Yes.
It's great. I think Orson Welles once said, you're set free with the best train set in the world. I mean, there's the thing. And in fact, it's when you get good at it, it's quite easy. You don't think, oh God, what am I doing? It was quite interesting when I was an editor. I used to just speak to one person or two, a director and a producer, and suddenly you have a crew of 50 people, and you go, and they're all waiting like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? There's a film crew do what the director tells them to do. And there was quite an interesting circumstance that, as I said, I started directing commercials, but then I got very bored. I was up at 4 o'clock one morning doing a pack shot, and I thought, why am I here with a whole crew moving it, maybe an eighth of an inch, it was boring. And I started making documentaries, which were Yeah, I mean, I think I'd made documentaries where I made an hour documentary in about 4 days shooting. So, I mean, that piece with McCartney that is in black and white is that we made a 20-minute film one night. We broke into his old school. That is what we do. Is he had rung me up. I'd made some films with him before, and he said, I want to break into my old school because they're going to knock it down. So I said, well, we'd probably get arrested, but you know, anyway, I in the end said, right, be at your old school, which is called Liverpool Institute. It's now, there's a nice end to this story. And we broke in, and, well, sort of broke in. But, you know, money often gets you into places which are locked up. And then he arrived at 10 o'clock, and we finished at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we made a 20-minute film in black and white. It's quite strange, because now every time he has a new archivist at his company, I get rung up and said, where's the colour master? And I said, no, we shot it in black and white. It was very deliberate that we shot it in black and white. Oh, right, there you go. But we made this film about his old school, where he and George went. And then it went out, and it was the mayor of Liverpool at the time wanted to close it down. Ironically, he went to the same school, and he wanted to flatten it and build a thing. And it's now called Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, LIPA. So if you want to become an actor, a director, a music producer, you want to go to LIPA. It's like this version, but in Liverpool, and it's the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, and it's extremely good. And we sort of saved it, yeah. So it's I mean, helped by Mr. McCartney's money, but that's it. But anyway, I wandered off there. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that was very interesting and very funny. Thank you. To keep up the theme of outside of the box, what were some of the most outside of the box moments when doing in your projects?
I don't know. I'm quite intrigued by your terminology, thinking outside the box, because and thank you very much, because I can make my own box, which is brilliant. Well done. I like the idea. I think what happens when you do something, always when it's like thinking outside the box, is that you've done something different. Unfortunately, or fortunately, you have to learn the rules of what you're about to break. I mean, amongst that stuff that you just got bored with, there's a Castrol commercial, and it was always thought that you couldn't do, you know, what. That's over 50 years ago. That commercial I made. And it was basically, there was always a theory that you couldn't do flash cuts, you couldn't do two-frame cuts, because people will get confused. But that's what we did. We overlaid and did that, and it did that. So you have to know the rules to then break the rules. Now, sometimes you can break the rules and it's a complete disaster. Other times, fortunately, you can make that. I think what you have to do, it's worth knowing the conventions so that you can do something different. But be prepared. You come sometimes, it can be a big mistake, and you and I mean that's one of the things with with being a film director, is that if it's a success, everyone made it. If it's a disaster, it was your fault. Yeah, there's a fabulous film made by Truffaut called The Nuit Americaine, or Day for Night, which is when we film something during the day to look at night. And it's the most accurate film of actually making a film, shot by Truffaut at Studio Victorine, ironically on a set that I had filmed a couple of times before at Victorine. But the thing is, once you learn how to do something, then you can experiment about doing something different. But you have to learn how to do it in the first place, to break the rules.
So you have worked with Pink Floyd, Sir Paul McCartney, Grace Kelly, interviewed Muhammad Gaddafi and Indira Gandhi even met the popes. How did that happen? Did you enjoy it?
They've all got different roots to them, but the political circumstances, you saw the beginning of that thing in The Making of Muhammad, which was a film I'd made about the making of a film called The Message, which we filmed behind the scenes and lots, and it had quite an interesting story that it originally started filming in Morocco, and then the picture got thrown out of Morocco, and Gaddafi welcomed it to Libya because the politics of the king of Saudi Arabia supported the king of Morocco, and they had built the Kaaba. The Kaaba, if you're a Muslim, is a place where you want to go to, or you should go to once in your life. And so there was have the Moroccans built a sort of Disneyland about come to Sunny. So they got thrown out and went to there. And then the producer of that film said, "Did I want to make 13 a series of films called Faces and Events, which were in Arabic, and we could choose the subject, any subject we wanted, except for the first one. The reporter had already picked the subject, which was about open heart surgery, and I'm a bit squeamish, or I was then, and I thought open heart surgery, and I had to film 4 operations of getting down to your heart, which was quite fascinating, but it was quite interesting. The first surgeon said, you have to wear heart gowns when we have to do that, but what you can't do is film the first cut. And I said, why? He said, well, because all film crews faint. and then the other subjects, we could pick whichever subjects. One was Indira Gandhi, because she was, had been elected as the prime minister of what was the biggest democracy in the world, India, and she was then in opposition when I made the film. So that's how we came to Indira Gandhi. Gaddafi, which was a little frightening because it was in the middle of the desert. I also made a film with the King of Saudi Arabia. That was really frightening because at the time we were the first film crew into Saudi Arabia since a film called Death of a Princess, and when the Saudi government banned any European film crews going to Saudi, and we were the first ones there. So I thought, and we were filming the King, and the King had about 20 people, all with guns, protecting him. And I thought, well, if anything happens to us, I can't see the British government coming to rescue us. Rescue Barry and his crew, or all the oil. No, forget Barry. So that was a little frightening. They came. The popes basically came because I had made. You saw the piece with Grace Kelly, or Her Serene Highness Princess Grace of Monaco, and we had filmed. I was asked to do a series of 12 programs for an American Catholic charity called Family Theatre, and with the first one we made in London, and it won lots of prizes in America. And so the producer rang me and said, "Hey, we're going to shoot all the link pieces, all the pieces with Grace in them, in the Vatican." I said, "No one's allowed to go into the Vatican. You can't film there." He said, "You can if the boss says so." And it seems Pope John Paul II had seen the programs and said, "Why don't we do the link pieces in the Vatican?" Which we did, and then so that's Pope number 1, and then Pope number 2 is that I had this idea about I'm not religious, so I can go to Mecca and I can go to Rome, and I'm not spooked by it. And I said, "Oh, you do the rosary now." Because the thing was the rosary priest, and I said it would be quite good to have all these cardinals doing it in their own language. So I had 12 cardinals one night filming in there, and one of them was the Archbishop of I can't remember what now, but he's the next Pope. It's because he was doing his bit in German. So that's the two popes. Is that enough?
I think so.
They're all bored. They're all going, oh, God.
So, you work with a lot of icons around the world. Which ones made most impact to you? Which ones do you like the most working with?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's been quite funny trying to get those pieces because that when I made them, to buy a copy of my program would be about the cost of a car. And now it'll just burn us a DVD, and there you got it. And so I've had to find them. I mean, all those Faces of Event series are the ones around the world. That's why we shot in the UN and stuff like that. Were made for Kuwait television, and their archive got blown up by Saddam Hussein when he took over the country. So there's my work's not there, So I don't know. I think I enjoyed working with Paul a lot because he's very good. I like working with the Pink Floyd. I'd had a big argument after after doing the films that appeared behind the Floyd playing Dark Side of the Moon with Roger Waters. So I didn't do. I did the English tour and the French tour. I didn't do the American tour. But then I finished up making the film about the making of The Wall. And it was quite interesting because Alan Parker was introducing me to the Pink Floyd, and they all went, "Hi Barry, hi Barry," and he went, "How do you know these?" I said, "Well, it's quite interesting working with musicians. Because they have a unique talent. There's lots and lots of musicians, and there's lots and lots of different people. So say something like Dark Side of the Moon is very different from what was going on at the same time. Ironically, being recorded by the same engineer, a guy called Alan Parsons, who was recorded some of McCartney's stuff. So they're very different circumstance. So I think it's I filmed Placido Domingo in New York Cathedral, and that was quite weird because with their choir, and as he finished singing, the whole choir applauded him. I said, "No, you have to do it again because I can't have you applauding him." But musicians have got great talent. I'm doing that.
So, what was the feeling of directing your first big project? You're scared? Do you enjoy it?
It's as I said, it's a bit strange because you're given a big train set, and it's quite strange. I think it's quite weird when you make documentaries. You're working with like 3 or 4 people, and then suddenly you got 58 people or 100 people working on a drama, and you just go, "Ooh," and you suddenly realise you've got to give them all something to do, because otherwise they're sit in the dark going. Now this is bad because they always refer to directors as she. She doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know. So you have to give the crew lots of things to do. Because then they won't say, don't know what they're doing. But
So we have heard that you helped to create the GIFs. That's true?
Well, this, I don't know. I had, after I finished directing, I then started doing some of the very first work the BBC did of interactivity. There was the BBC wasted, as it was termed at the time, a lot of money doing experiments in interactivity. And in that interactivity, there was something invented called a GIF. But we had already done that because I'd made a commercial for the Beach Boys. Well, I'd made a commercial for EMI, who had the distribution rights of the Beach Boys. But the Beach Boys, it was called The Best of the Beach Boys, and the Beach Boys said, well, that means our careers ended, so we won't allow any of our material to go on it. So we went, oh God, what do we film? What do we have on screen as like the best of the Beach Boys? And I was working with an editor who I work with a lot, and he suddenly realizes that on a moviola you can throw things backwards and forwards, and if we actually took some material, we actually made a whole commercial of things going backwards and forwards. And then many years later, people made things called GIFs, which was things running backwards and forwards. So, and I think it was some people here in Portugal who started the rumour that I'd started GIFs, but it was really lack of having the Beach Boys sell their own album.
Would you do something different in your career?
Would I like to do something different?
Yeah.
Oh yes, a nice steady job, doing nothing, and just getting paid, knowing I'm going to get a pension at the end would be really good, But no, it's you can't. It's quite exciting doing that thing. You wake up in the morning. You usually have to be at work very, very early because someone's had the daft idea that we'd get the sunrise. Oh God, that's early. And you work very late at night. I once made a series. I made about 18 one-hour programs in about a space of 2 years, and I rang up some towards the end of it. And it would mean that I was away for 2 weeks, came back to the UK, and did the post-production in a week, and then would go off again. And I rang some friends of mine and went, "Hi, we must go for dinner." And they go, "Who? Barry? Who? Do we know anyone called Barry?" I said, so no, it's quite fun, but you do get bored with sitting on airplanes and staying in hotels, which keep giving you food and drink and stuff. No, it's horrible.
Did you had a plan B if you weren't a director? Did you had a plan B? If you weren't a director, what you would be?
If I had a what? Sorry.
Plan B. A plan B.
Plan B.
Oh, a plan B. No. Plan B means that you may go, oh, there's another way to go. No. I think, involved in my career is a lot of luck. I was in the right place at the right time. I could have been making, I've made industrial film, films about, how the Barclays Bank work and things like that, and it's quite good. But no, I don't think I'd ever said, oh, I could go and do something else. No, and when you're doing it, you don't even think about it. So that's.
Now we are going to ask the audience if they have any questions. Please raise their hands one at a time. There's one. The microphone is supposedly passing there.
He's way at the back.
Raise your hand higher.
Hello. Do you think that it's easy as
with no job experience to get into the industry? Like with no job experience, do you think that it's easy to get into the industry, like get a job?
It's much more difficult now. Although there are many more films being made than when I started, and many more productions. You know, when I started, there was one television channel, and there wasn't the amount of feature films, which made it sort of those who chose to try and get the jobs. There wasn't many of them. Now there's a massive amount. There's from anything from Netflix, let's make extremely long, boring films, through to much more media where you use the moving image. So there's much more opportunities. Whether that's good or bad, I mean, I sort of groan occasionally when I get a Netflix. I'm a judge for or a voting member for BAFTA, and when something comes in with Netflix written on it, I go, oh God, it's going to be incredibly long, because you may have noticed that there used to be things called director's cuts. Now that was basically because you edited something together and it came out. The exhibitors, the cinema owners, hated anything that was over 100 minutes long, because they make more money out of selling ice cream than they do running the movie. And so they would make sure that everything was under 100 minutes. Now, as far as Netflix are concerned, they commissioned a 1 hour or a 2 hour movie, and it runs for 7 hours. And they go, oh great, we've got 7 hours of really boring stuff. And so occasionally you go, oh, I want to know. But your question about getting into the industry, there are other ways of doing it. I've got a friend of mine who is in America, who makes short films, and they're getting more and more popular. He can make them with a few friends and a few actors, and so he's working it that way. There are more opportunities, and you take a film. There was a film that won lots of awards a few years ago, which was about a deaf child. About a child who had deaf parents, and that really got prominence because it was in one competition, and then got a full release. So there's lots of ways. You just got to do good work, and it will shine out. Then you can do crappy work because everyone says, "Oh, you used to make good work," so you can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Best of luck, by the way, trying to get in.
We have a question right here. Raise your hands, please.
Hi, Barry.
Hi.
So you work with a lot of people in your career. Is there someone you would like to work with or wish you would have worked with still?
I don't know. I wish I'd worked with. I don't know. No. I think I tend to work on. I don't sit there going, oh, I really want to work with that person, whether it be writers. I mean, I think writers. You have to remember is that everything we do in the film industry starts with writers. But obviously, as a director of documentaries, you're writing it. You don't know what you were going to do in the first place, so you tend to write it. You write post once you've filmed it. I don't think there's anyone. I mean, I've been really lucky. I mean, it's quite funny. My children think it's incredibly funny because I used to own a post-production company in London, and once every year, for over about 4 years, a guy called Charlie Chaplin would rent a room for a month and re-edit some of his things. And so my children, who I said, oh, I met Charlie Chaplin. Oh, was he in black and white? Was it colour? I mean, that must have been a fantastic time when they were making films in 1915, which no one had ever done. One has to remember that Charlie Chaplin was a multi-millionaire during the First World War. He was the richest man in the world, but he never changed his British passport to an American passport, and in fact they threw him out of America in 1952, thinking he was a premature anti-fascist. So, and he then spent the rest of his life in Switzerland. Yeah, I'm sorry, very long answer. That's the name's Chattington. Oh, very long. But no, I can't think there's someone I would really, I'm desperate to work with. Robert Bolt maybe, because I thought he was a fabulous writer, but I can't think of anyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Please raise their hands when you want to ask some questions.
Hi, Barry.
Hi.
Have you ever thought about going back to make a new TV project?
Sorry?
Have you ever thought of going back to make a new TV project, a documentary or something?
I have. I mean, at the moment, I'm trying to start a television station which is about ecology. But that, to start a television station, you need a huge amount of money, and I don't have a huge amount of money. I unfortunately married a lady 28 years younger than me, so that caused the not having much money. But I would like to do that television station. There's a script that I've helped someone make from their book. And I wouldn't mind making that again. But the problem, as much as anything, with anything to do with the entertainment industry, is called money. You need lots of money to make it. So if we all put in a few pennies, we can start a television station, or make a feature film. I mean, yes, it's a great business to work in. But you have to understand that it's not exactly the most honest business in the world. I mean, Wardour Street, which was the centre of where the British film industry was known as the only street in London that was shady both sides. Because it's the film industry makes a lot of money, but there's a lot of people make the money on the way. I now get very intrigued by the number of executive producers who are on the front credits of every film, because I think, well, what did they do? What did they do? But yes, but it's just send me your money and I'll make.
All right, I'll. Thank you.
Okay.
I got a
Sup?
question. Queres fazer tu?
If I can.
Okay, you can go first then. Go.
Sorry. Hi.
Hi.
Do you have any funny stories with Monty Python? And have some stories with Monty Python?
Monty Python used to finish all their feature films in my. As I said, I owned a post-production company called Roger Cherrell Limited, and all their feature films were finished at our building and in my sound studio, which was about slightly smaller than this, but it was in a basement in Soho. Over the years I've worked with them at various points, but they tend to work with themselves much more than anything else. But they're extremely clever talents. In the UK, we seem to have always had lots of comedians who broke things, and in fact, they always say they owe a lot to a group of people called the Goons, which were in the 50s. So, there's a sort of carrying on of comedy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello, how
Hi.
are you? So, you have any advice for us? young people, new generation, maybe for the future?
Just hope you're lucky. You know, I mean, as I said, in life there's a lot to do with lack of being in the right place, but you've got to have the basic talent to be able to make the luck work. I mean, there's accusations often in the film industry, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It only happens once that you happen to know someone who happens to know someone that you get a job. If you're crap at it, you don't ever work again. The film industry is on virtually all freelance, in the sense that you work from one job to another. And so if I'm suddenly getting a new cameraman, I ring up a few directors I know who've worked with him and say, what's this guy like? What's this woman? What's this lady? What is this camera person like? Oh, rubbish, causes problems, is always moaning. Right, I don't want to work with her. So, you know, you have to be good at what you do and consistently good. So
Okay.
just be good.
No. You know the Queen. You.
Do I know
Elizabeth Queen. You know the Elizabeth Queen or no?
Did you ever meet Elizabeth the Queen? Did you ever meet her, the Queen?
Oh, the Queen. Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God.
I made a film with Princess Anne. I filmed King Charles. There's a charity in the UK called Variety Club, and it basically helps children. And so I've made about 4 or 5 films with them, and the royal family's always been involved in that. I made a film with Prince Charles's uncle and things like that. So yeah. But the Queen, I never made a film with, but I met her. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, best of luck for all of you in whatever you do, and enjoy.
Thank
Major
you.
thing is, whatever you do, enjoy what you're doing.
Thank you. I think this is the last question coming from both of us. What was it like working with Grace Kelly? What was it like to work with Grace Kelly?
Oh, Grace. Well, Grace was fabulous. I was the last person to work with her. In fact, we were supposed to do 12 programs. I made 5 of them, and on the last time I worked with her was in the Vatican, and she said, "Oh, you must come down to my place." Yeah, which I went, "Oh, that's rather good." This weekend, and I said, "Well, I can't because I've got a program going out," which was, in fact, the program about making The Wall, the movie. And I said, "I can't come this weekend. I'll come next weekend." And she said, "Oh, I'm on holiday." And she said, "Well, come when I'm back." And she died on the way back. And she was extremely good. Very professional, very good, and I liked working with her. When we were filming in the Vatican, her son came as well, who was about 20 at the time, and she was just a great performer and very funny person, she said to me once, we're on the main altar of St. Peter's, and she said, "Barry, when I was young and beautiful, I had a thing. I had a clause in my contract saying that I didn't work after 5 o'clock. What am I doing here with you after midnight?" And I said, "What do you mean, when you were young and beautiful?" She said, "Oh yeah, that's why I'm here. The bullshit." She was good.
So, you want to share with us the funniest story that you work with? The funniest moment that you work with?
Oh, don't know, funny. I don't know about. I think I tend to laugh and think things are funny. I mean, there's lots of people. You can either look on the bright side or always back to Monty Python's, always look on the bright side of life. I think I tend to think, what are we doing here at 5:30 in the morning on a freezing day, doing a bloody sunrise? Whose idea was this? Oh, mine. I think I've lived a life on the whole, looking on the bright side, you know. So no, I think there's lots. If you think funnily, if you've got a sense of humour, you will do it. But no, there are many silly occasions. Yeah, I used to have a camera assistant when we were filming around the world, who we could blindfold and take into a hotel, one of the international chains. And when we got him to the room, he could tell which chain of hotels it was in by going, oh, this is an Intercontinental, right? Because he could work out from the room. So, yeah, but that wouldn't be very silly. Yeah, people go, oh, boring. But, yeah, it was quite funny at the time. But, yes, I just realised that he had a very funny sense of humour as well. In the sense that every day we're in Saudi. No, I can't tell you this story. I just realised it's rude. Right.
We have space for one more question. Do you want anyone? Over there. Desculpa, Miguel.
The man with the microphone's got a long walk.
Growing up, was television the only thing that inspired you to go to be a film director, or was there a particular film that you watched when you were younger, or perhaps films made by one director that inspired you to follow this path?
I've missed all of that.
You want to repeat the question? Please.
Sorry. Growing up, was television the only thing, like television in general, that inspired you to become a film director? Or was there perhaps a particular film or a particular director that inspired you to follow this path?
Me. Two films, actually. One was, I saw West Side Story when I was 14. And the beginning of West Side Story was in... West Side Story is made in 7 channels of sound. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 7. And in fact, the very opening scene of this is if you went to a big cinema, it starts and the music starts, and then there's a whistle that comes over your head and goes to the front. And I went, oh, this is good. And then it went on and got better and better. I suppose the other... there was a director called... I think I'd seen a film when I was about 7, which was called A Kid for Two Farthings, directed by a guy who I just thought was a fabulous thing. And when I was about 20, I was worked with him as an assistant director, as an assistant editor. So yeah, but I think West Side Story was just amazing as much as anything because of the sound and the music, and that's the original West Side Story. I think Stephen's remake of it is rubbish, but that's beside the point.
Do you have a final words just for finishing your presentation?
Yeah. Whatever you do, remember, just enjoy it. Because there's nothing worse than doing something you don't like. You're going to spend 8 hours a day working away. And if you don't like it, it's not much fun. So try and do something you enjoy doing.
Thank you so much.
Oh. And think out the box.
Marco, tú. Não, ótimo, maravilhoso. Podem